we have Jenni as our host. She's been a loyal follower since day one, so I'm excited to have her host today, give her the spotlight. We're going to be talking about resilience, which actually, ironically, we had a webinar earlier this morning around 11, I think, and it was all about neuroscience. I can't remember the name of it. It was Neuroscience Building Resilience in the Face of Uncertainty. And I put the link in the chat group, so if you do want to watch it later on, if you haven't already checked it out, I highly recommend it. It's about 25 minutes long, but it's a follow-up to our first Neuroscience of Stress webinar. So please do check it out. Also, I am a little bit of a nature geek. I don't know if you know this, but I used to work in a greenhouse before moving to London. And so I regularly kind of keep up with just conservation environment. And I was reading a blog today that Natural England put out. And it was about adapting to climate change. And two of the things that they said that was really important for us to adapt to climate change was to build resilience of the things that we value and want to maintain, and to accept changes we can't prevent and manage for the best outcome in changed circumstances. So I thought that just really resonates with, Natural England doesn't have much to do with HR, but I thought it resonated really well with our people right now because we're all going through change and resilience is so important. So today, I know the past few episodes we've done introductions with what's made us happy today, but I've been asked recently what has made me happy through lockdown, and I thought it'd be cool if we went around and just asked each other what you've gotten out of lockdown that's made you happy. So I think I'll start off with Emma.
So, sitting outside as I say this, I'm going to say that having good weather has really made lockdown bearable. I think without it, we'd all go far more insane.
Yeah, that's the only way I can get outside is if the good weather is around and gives you a break from sitting at the desk all day. Helen.
Hi, Helen here. What have I got out of lockdown? I really love not getting on the tube in the morning, got to say, and all the free time that's come back. I'm quite happy. Although now I'm starting to slightly weirdly miss it. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Jane.
My puppy, obviously. Definitely having the puppy. It's been lovely. Good excuses to have breaks during the day, to go for a walk in the sunshine, and get away from the computer as well. So
cool. Great. Jenni.
Pretty much the same. I've got 2 dogs, and I just love spending time with them. And it's great because my husband and I walk at the beginning and end of the day, and it's almost like that's replaced the commute, and I'm very happy with that.
Great. Joe.
It's all about the sunshine. So much so that I'm sitting here with my shirt off now, which is why my camera's off. So I don't want to scare you all off. But yeah, the sun is, like someone said before, it's making it so bearable, which is amazing.
I agree 100%. I actually got the idea for this question from Joe, so thanks, Joe. Kevin.
A combination of all of those things. Like the weather has been brilliant. I guess getting to know my daughter because she was outside a nursery and the back doors were open, the garden was free. So yeah, just being in her life all day as opposed to for half an hour in the evening has been brilliant.
Lucy. You're on mute, hon.
Sorry guys. What's made me happy has just been kind of the slower pace of life, just being able to, like Helen said, like kind of not rushing on and off the tube, just being able to have nice breaks in the day, work outside. And I've really enjoyed cycling in London on the roads without being really scared because of the busy traffic. So I've been cycling, kind of doing all the main sightseeing, which has been wonderful. So I've enjoyed that.
Thank you, Lucy. Maria.
Hello. Well, I work from home most of the time anyway, so it's not a huge change for me for that. But like you, Rosie, I'm a massive nature junkie, so I really loved the fact that no one was going anywhere and nature could actually heal a little bit. So that was really cool. I'd be really interested to see what the outcomes of that are longer term, if it made any real impact. And can you share that article with me, please, Rosie, that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share it in my follow-up to everybody and read it. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
Natasha.
I think for me, it's been getting all the time back that I never really had. Like I always used work as an excuse to like not read a book or not learn to like try and run a 5K and stuff like that. So I think the best thing for me has been like having time. Like I was in the park yesterday by like 20 to 6 after finishing work after like at past, which I never could have done before. I've had to slog on a train and then wouldn't have had the energy probably to go and sit in a park and like socialize. So for me, it's all that extra time. I can't use it as an excuse anymore.
You're like me. I spend most of my free time at the park, so I've become kind of a park bum. It's been nice. Silke.
Better unmute. Hi, everyone. Pretty much what everybody else has already said. It's been lovely having both my kids at home, both my girls, and the older one has been dragging me out for long cycle rides, which I wouldn't normally have done. So that's been great. And obviously the weather has helped, and yeah, just not having as much traffic on the road. So yeah, what everybody else said as well.
It's funny, everybody's spending more time to cycle, and I actually went to a bike shop recently with my flatmate, and they said that they've had the best 2 months of business in the past 15 years since they've been open. So it's amazing to see. And Valerie.
So being the last, all of the above, and also the routine of having a long walk with my husband and my daughter, and discovering our area that we thought we knew. We live in Chiswick in London, but we discovered even more. So that's been brilliant.
Really cool. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, thanks, guys. Jenni, my first question for you, we're going to get started, is could you just give us a little background on Arup and what you guys do?
Yeah, certainly. So Arup is a creative firm. It's got engineers, architects, planners, acousticians, I can never say that word, designers. It's pretty much everything. There's a huge amount of disciplines. There's 15,000 specialists in the firm, working across 90 disciplines, projects in about 140 countries. And the strap line of Arup is to shape a better world. So that's kind of what we sort of stand by, as it were. We've got offices in 30 countries, and we've got 5 regions around the world. And I'm not sure, not many people are aware of this, but it's a membership organisation. So it's owned by its members, as it were. And it's the second largest one in the UK after the John Lewis Partnership, who I worked for last year. So it's kind of like I've gone from the first one to the second one in terms of size. And it for me, it makes a lot of difference in terms of it being purpose driven. It's the aims, the means. And that's what really ignites me, really. It was founded by Sir Ove Arup. He was actually a philosopher before he was an engineer. Silke and I were talking about this the other day, actually. So sorry, Silke, that you've heard half of this before. But he came to engineering later in his life, and he started Arup when he was in his 50s, which I think is fascinating, that he was so curious and still hungry to do something that he believed in at that point, rather than just kind of thinking, oh, it's all downhill to retirement. So I think that was pretty unusual. This year marks the 50th year since something called the Key Speech. And it was a speech he made to the kind of like the senior exec team, if you like, in 1970 in Winchester, of all places. And it was essentially to talk about the aims and means of the firm and what it actually meant. And there are 6 values that I just wanted to mention, because I think it's really important. And where we are today, culturally in the world, in a pandemic, I don't think they've ever made... Oh, let me see whether I can do that. Don't know whether that's going to help. Let me know if I'm a bit louder now and that's helping. The 6 values were quality of work, total architecture, being a humane organisation, straight and honourable dealings. Oh, okay. Being socially useful and reasonable prosperity, which is a really interesting phrase, I always think. One of the things that Arup built, which is just worthy of note, so you kind of get a feel for the scale of the buildings, is the Sydney Opera House. And back then, with the Sydney Opera House, which will be 50 years old in the next couple of years, they were using computers and artificial intelligence to design the curves, because they're self-supported. It's very unusual. So that's the type of work. At the moment, one of the best projects, or rather one of the ones I'm most excited about, is that we're finishing the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. So Gaudi left it unfinished, but he left all the drawings. The only thing Gaudi didn't do was recognise the fact he stopped at the point where engineeringly, at that point, it became impossible. So what's happening at the moment is developing new material to kind of like build it to actually look like old materials, but be like super amazing, cool new materials that are super light, because the crypt that it's all built on, they can't put great big towers on now, but they are going to. So yeah, it's just fascinating that some of the work is, you know, sort of that sort of based. And it kind of brings me around to the sustainability piece, the nature piece. That was such a, Rosie and I didn't even talk about this, but one of the things that, again, with the guiding principles, the other thing is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them. You can look them up online, but let me just quickly run through a couple of them. So this is an aim for the globe for 2030. No poverty, zero hunger, good wealth, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and partnerships for the goals. So that hopefully gives you a feeling for what those are. It's kind of a bit of a ramble through, but I think it's really important that thinking about Nature England, that'll be very much on the same track. So as a company, you can imagine why at this moment in time it's so important with all of those things, with where we find ourselves, that the aims and means, the values of the business are really important. And I'm really proud as well to announce that 2 days ago was International Women in Engineering Day, and out of the top 50 women in engineering, 6 of them work at Arup, which is pretty, I know, pretty incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's, don't get me wrong, it's just a start, but it's just really nice to see some of those green shoots appearing. And it was one of those moments when it got reported, they were like, oh, hopefully we'll do okay. And then it's like 6 out of 50 in the whole world. It's like, wow, that's brilliant.
That's incredible. Congratulations. That's great. Okay, thank you for that background. Can I ask you, how has lockdown been for you and your team at Arup, and how have you maintained resilience through this?
Yeah, the team, we were, like most people, working from home really quickly. And in fact, globally, 95% of the firm was working from home within about a 2-week sort of time frame. So our poor IT teams were really up against it, and they were rolling out teams the whole of this year, but like so many other IT teams, they kind of like got on it, and we had that within about 2 weeks, the sort of full optimal sort of use of it. But it's all the stuff I would say in terms of that you have all experienced and that we've talked about on these calls for the last few weeks, so I won't go into sort of the finer detail because you'll be like, yeah, we've been there, talked about that. But it's in terms of thinking about how we've all sort of managed with some of the new ways of working. It's been video calls, but the fatigue that comes with that. And in terms of resilience, we've ended up, you know, probably all of us thinking we need to go and see the opticians a bit more. We've got square eyes, as my mum would say to me, sitting in front of a computer screen all day. So from that point of view, I think it's been really important with resilience to recognise these things, because it's so easy sometimes just to not recognise them. And like the previous speakers last week, sometimes it's noting the really simple stuff that we all go, oh yeah, absolutely, and sharing that. And also as well thinking about what it means for all of us working from home in terms of our natural styles, what's good for us, what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And probably overcompensating for conversations, you know. So I've certainly learned within the first couple of weeks, quite, as you can imagine, gregarious. I'm an E in terms of profile, as it were, and I like to talk to people. And I suddenly realised I had to plug back in all those little water cooler moments that I was missing. So, you know, I've just artificially had to put them in, but it works really well. We came off a team call yesterday and we had about 20 minutes back. And one of the team messaged me straight away and said, oh, can we just use this 20 minutes to catch up? And I was like, yes. So it's been taking opportunities like that just don't present themselves. But some of the sort of bigger things outside of our team in terms of resilience and how people have coped was, I think when we went into crisis mode, first of all, it was really hard. And one of the things you can imagine being an engineering firm is most of our sort of client-facing teams go on site. So they go on site visits, they go and look at places and buildings and hospitals and all this sort of good stuff, all the built environment, if you like. And it was interesting because travel stopped completely. And for a global firm who have lots of people traveling, that was a massive shock. And for a lot of people, I think that meant that they had to readjust what they were doing with their time. But they still had to fulfill some of the same sort of things. So we were using GoPros, and one person would go on site and they'd use GoPros for like walking an entire team of engineers around a site. And just little things like that, where in terms of resilience, it was like, we can't do it the old way. What are we going to do with the new way? Is this a good way of doing things? And kind of iterating that very quickly. I think it started with literally a mobile phone, and then somebody's like, a GoPro is a better kind of camera. And they're like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's take a GoPro out. So from that point of view, and then we've been plugging in the usual sort of things in terms of HR. It's nothing rocket science really. It's kind of just thinking about the variety of things that we provide for people in terms of conversations, coaching opportunities, and tools. You know, how we do all of that. And equally as well, it's been making sure that people feel comfortable on these sort of calls. I mean, you guys at the Happiness Index have done a great job. We all feel comfortable on this. We're all kind of like in shorts, or Joe has top off, or things like that. But, you know, it's kind of making this kind of like great atmosphere on every call is really hard, isn't it, sometimes? And you've probably all done the thing that we've all had to do, which is meet new people. And you're like, oh, how's this going to go? And then thinking about, you know, who we open our homes up to, and some people have found that easier than others. I love meeting everybody's pets, for instance, but that's not surprising. But you know, in terms of one of our team, one example I wanted to share with you was within 2 weeks of going into lockdown, her mum had a carer and was in her own home, but her mum has dementia. But her mum's carer wanted to go back home, so her mum suddenly didn't have a carer, so she had to go and pick her mum up one weekend, drop everything and bring her mum to live with her. The week of calls after that for her was so tough because, number one, she was on the COVID-19 sort of steering group for the company. And then her mum would just wander in and like look into the camera. And so we really helped her with normalizing that and chatting to her mum. So we invited literally everybody, and it really helped. And then it got to the stage where I think you've probably all had this as well, where you're celebrating somebody's children's birthdays and all this sort of stuff. So we were basically just inviting everybody to bring everything in and literally have the whole lot in there. So yeah, that's kind of where we are and how we've adapted, I think.
Yeah. When Joe asked me what's made me happy through lockdown, one of the things I said was eat your new PJs, because I never would have been able to do this without lockdown. I'm pretty good with that normally. So. But the second thing was being able to get to know my team better. Somehow we've just like been able to video chat and everything. And you don't really get that personal, like in-person connection, but still it's been fun to just have the morning pickups and have those moments of just being able to laugh with each other. As having that in the office is kind of miss that, but yeah, having those catch-ups, I guess, every now and then really does help. Okay, so my next question is, you've mentioned in conversations with us in the past that you have a pretty open and communicative culture at Arup. Am I saying that right? I think I said it wrong the first time. How did you build a culture of trust? And has it always been that way before lockdown, or did it kind of build up even more so over the past few months?
Yeah, it's I think it's really interesting. One of the things that we're doing on Yammer within the global people team at the moment is asking ourselves about things that we've stopped and started, and are we continuing them or are we not going to continue them? And it's really powerful because there are things that we weren't doing before. So for instance, our chairman now does a weekly vlog, and it sounds so simple, but it's amazing how much it's been well received, and people comment online, and it's only 3 or 4 minutes, and Alan talks. And he welcomes you into his office. You know, it's very much the kind of like, and he starts with a hello every week, and he says it, and you know, you sort of think it's like your uncle. It's like you're suddenly going, this is familiar. I know where we are with this. It's kind of like Uncle Alan. And he talks us through, first and foremost, his first priority is always, how are people in the firm? And he talks through, you know, whether there's been some COVID-19 cases. And he's lovely because you see him enthused every week saying, we've had no new cases this week and everybody's getting better and only one person's not back at work. And it's just really nice because it's sort of that reassurance that we are keeping an eye on it. People are monitoring it, but not from a point of view of finger pointing. So I think from that point of view, we've seen some really great examples of him leading like that. And I'll share a little secret with you. The comms team have been dying to get him to do video vlogs for ages. And he's been, bless him, he's quite a reserved chap. I'm not sure. And all of a sudden, like pandemic has just accelerated all of that. And all of a sudden, I was talking to the head of comms the other day and she was like, it was going to take me months for him to do that. Look what it's done. So, you know, that's a good thing that's come out of this crisis. And I'm sure you've probably all got stories about that as well. So that, from that point of view, that's changed. That's going to stay, not maybe as a weekly thing, but as a regular thing. We've also had so much going on Yammer, our internal sort of social media channel, and it's not just been about like, let's put a COVID-19 like thread on there and everybody talks about COVID, which has been part of it. But one of the best things was an article that the IT team got hold of, and then I got hold of, and between us all we shared it, and that went viral. Was it's okay not to be okay. And so back to the resilience piece again, we were just encouraging people to really kind of like go with the flow about being who they are. And do you know, the most interesting thing for us was culturally, one of the regions that's often the most reserved in showing emotion is our Asia region. They went absolutely mad for it and they absolutely loved it and really embraced it. And it's been so nice to see breaking down of what you might expect cultural norms to be in certain parts of the world. So it's been a real learn. And actually I think the rest of us were like, well, it just shows you've got to keep your eyes and your ears open because you don't know how people are going to react. And again, that's why, you know, sharing as many things to say it's okay to be yourself kind of thing. One of the other brilliant threads was something that's called What I Saw Out of My Window. And this thread has literally just been people sharing kind of like, just like we all are now. And we're looking at each other's views and where we're sitting and everything. And it's really nice because you get that personal connection. And so people have been sharing pictures of a plant that's been growing. There's been a bit of, I think, a wisteria competition going on. So there's been some, you know, serious pictures of really big wisterias on there. So that's been interesting. And then somebody who's suddenly developed a really, really nice eye for photographing birds. And he never really realized that. You know, and it's just really good. And then probably one that's really common to most places is pets. So we've got Pets of Arup, and it's just a continued delight. And again, it's people around the world just showing how they're interacting with their pets, or pets sleeping on laptops. It's usually cats at that point. Dogs trying to destroy the house whilst you're on a conference call, you know, the usual sort of stuff. So that's kind of some of the new ways we've been communicating. I think it's just highlighted what's worked well, Yammer. And when a post goes viral, it's always been about people's welfare. So that's really interesting. I think that's something that we just can't ignore going forward. And also as well, one of the things that's gone down really well is we set up a hub, which is called the Bewell Hub, and it's a wellness hub. And again, it's not the rocket sciencey bits. It's just that we've been putting stuff in there. Like it kind of almost came out of the it's okay not to be okay list. And we thought, well, actually, if people really enjoy this sort of material, where can we put it all in one place for them? And there was learning stuff on there as well. We've just got set up a thing with LinkedIn. So there's some learning on there because, again, I'm just trying to remember who made the point. I think it was Natasha, wasn't it, about learning stuff. You know, people are like, oh, I'm at home and actually I'm not commuting. Could I learn something more? So actually we've there's lots of free sort of learning resources on there as well, also to make sure that people kept that sense of purpose.
Jenny, how many people are on the internal communication channel? You said that you've got different locations, or like I think you said your Asian friend is excited about that. It's okay to be okay.
God, I'm not sure of the numbers, but it's in terms of Yammer, I think it's at least a good third of the firm are on there. So it's pretty high numbers. There's about 16,000 us globally. So yeah, the interactions are pretty good. I mean, sometimes they're really low, but yeah, there's an amazing amount of people that are sort of falling on and off there, I think, at the moment.
I'm just going to mute you when I talk. Thank you. I want to go back to what you said about that blog, though, because something that was brought up today that I really picked up on in the neuroscience session with Clive, our head of neuroscience at the Happiness Index, he said emotions are the fuel of our behaviors. And I think that blog really, it links up with that, because it's good to acknowledge those emotions, and it's good to not just cover that up, because, and like you said, fuel is emotion is oh my God, I'm messing this up completely. Emotions are the fuel of our behavior. So that's really interesting. Is there a way that you could share that blog with us too, or is that something that's more for internal?
Sadly, that's an internal thing.
Okay.
We're really protective over that, because one of the things that we've done a big event in March, actually, which I kind of probably should have mentioned by now, but we did a big three-day conversation that was in the first week of March, which globally was just the most incredible timing. I mean, it was dumb luck, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like brilliant timing. But by the end of it, one of the threads was around COVID-19. And one of the comments that came back, Rosie, which is why you just reminded me, was how people felt it was such an open and honest conversation, and they could just be themselves, because they knew it wasn't going to go any further, and that they could be internally focused, because at that point, you know, things were kicking off at completely different paces in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my next question, how do you maintain that kind of open and honest culture across your global offices, and especially during lockdown in a virtual environment?
Good question. I think some of it has been around storytelling. So I was thinking about this, Rosie, because it's really important that when we realised where a lot of the feeling was coming from, and it was from a region we didn't expect before, it suddenly made us realise that, you know, this is, I was going to say, I'm telling you all how to suck eggs, but listening is really important, right? But one of the things that was really important was that as soon as we realised on this 3-day event what was coming out of East Asia particularly, and then we found the It's Okay list within 2 weeks, was the incredible feeling, and this again was one of those, you kind of stumble across it, was that we'd heard these like almost cries for help, as it were. We plugged something really basic and really quick in, but it was the realization that we'd gone through a kind of little phase of listening, realization, acknowledgement, and then giving something back. And it was really interesting, because when we came out the back of that, we realized that as a firm, we probably had looked at something that was happening in a region and thought, oh, that's just happening over there. And then all of a sudden it swept the entire globe. And it was extremely humbling. So it was a question of very much making sure that we were sharing stories. And one of the things that the team, in particularly China and Hong Kong, were amazing at was sharing their stories of how they were coming through all of this way ahead of the rest of us in Europe and America. And it was absolutely brilliant. But again, one of the reasons they were sharing was because they felt genuinely listened to. And it was kind of like we just got into this routine of listening, realizing, and then kind of acknowledging and reacting in some sort of way. And I think that's really echoed in a lot of the work that so many companies are doing right now over Black Lives Matter, because all of a sudden it's that proper listening, the deep listening, saying I've heard you. And without realizing it, we stumbled through that ourselves, as it were. So it's now how we do that, because I think a genuine response, but also a genuine acknowledgement saying we got that wrong, you know, we should have been listening harder, was the thing that helped the rest of the firm. And then the stories came out, and it was absolutely amazing. And the Wuhan office opened on the 8th of April, and we remember it vividly. And we put a massive focus on them. It was willingly from them on the day they opened, and there was a huge amount of razzmatazz because it was actually demonstrating, and from that there was all the learned, and then we get into all the practical stuff around, okay, so what actually worked at that point, but it all comes back to that human story piece.
Amazing, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so my next question is, this is something that you mentioned in one of our previous episodes, and actually Caroline picked up on this and she wanted me to ask you about this. Thanks, Caroline, for the question. She's not on the call today, actually, but how can you tell us about how your engineers have been working through COVID-19? I know you've kind of told me about it a little bit, but it's a really interesting story, I think. And it'd be great if you could kind of tell us about the competition that they're a part of as well.
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. So we have a lighting team, we have lighting engineers, and through all of this. So if I come right the way back to the fact that our strapline is Shape a Better World, and we find ourselves where we are now, a lot of the engineers are saying, well, what does that mean? Because it would be really easy for that to just be Shape a Better World in lovely, big westernized cities, wouldn't it? But actually, that's not the whole point of UN Sustainable Development Goals either. So with all of this going on, one of the things the lighting team did was enter a competition. And the competition is innovation, essentially. So what innovation have they developed? And they've developed these amazing little modular tiles that are kind of like the size of a big dinner plate, or maybe a wok or something like that. And they're hexagonal in shape. And they're solar-powered lighting panels. Now, the brilliant thing about them is they do not need to be connected to electricity, as it might suggest. They're solar powered. But the amazing thing is they can be used singularly on their own, or they can be used to build like canopies over areas. And one of the things that they're hoping to use this for and developing it for is refugee camps. So it feels really amazing, because refugee camps are very unsafe places. They're very dangerous places. They're places where a lot of the things that we take for granted don't exist, lighting being one of them. And lighting is so important for people's well-being, for their safety and things like that. And if you can imagine, you can put them together like a honeycomb. I believe you can actually even build structures out of them. But if you think about a canopy over a street, that you can suddenly provide a safe place for people to meet, a safe place for children to walk about at night. It's quite, you know, inspiring that they're doing this. And what's been really brilliant is we came through the crisis mode of everybody just, let's try and work from home, let's just do this. And now people are using some of this time and this headspace they've got to actually say, how are we going to make a better world? And what does that mean?
It's really cool.
And did you want me to talk about Carebox as well?
Yeah, please.
Cool. Carebox is another, you can probably tell I'm absolutely blown away by working in a firm that does stuff like this. It's amazing. Carebox is an incredible sort of concept in that you build hospital beds in a modular fashion as a unit, a single unit. And you do this and you build it in such a way that when you get it to its location, I think you just need power and water, you know, it's essentially like that. And you can add them together like Lego bricks and you can build hospitals. But the great thing is that these things aren't permanent structures. And one of the places that they are hoping to take this, so this was developed absolutely in the spirit of COVID-19, because one of the things that the team were involved with was building the Nightingale Hospital in London. That was where they had the experience. They were like, hang on a minute, how can we use this experience of putting the units together? So what they're doing now is putting it together, and in the Rohingya camp at Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, there's no healthcare there at the moment, and what they're hoping to do is put this sort of modular structure in there so it can provide that sort of healthcare. But because it's modular, it can be moved so that at certain points, if there are different places that need this to then be transported to, they can do that as well. So it's thinking a bit more, if you'll pardon the pun, out the box, and in the box, as it were, to make sure that we've got these sort of solutions that, again, aren't just plugged into kind of like building beautiful buildings, but actually it's kind of like, how is it responding to needs of particularly transient populations?
Really cool, thank you. I read something today as well. I've been reading a lot of things today. As humans, we're all kind of focused around balance with our work life, our home life, our well-being, everything like that. And I think like we take and take, but it's also important to balance that out with giving. And I think that your company really does that, it sounds like. So it's really cool to hear those stories. Okay, so you mentioned as well reimagining workspaces. So could you tell us a little bit what this means for Arup?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I'm always back to the being engineers and designers. But one of the things at the moment is thinking about how we go back into the office. And then some bright spark went, hang on a minute, if we're experts at doing this, maybe we should be sort of helping other companies. It's like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. And so if you do want to look at this in any detail, go on to arup.com. I won't go through all the spiel now, but it's really quick reading and you can scroll through and there's pictures. But it's now about supporting companies with using some of the modeling, the AI, to reimagine workspaces. So one of the things, and I have made notes on this so I get the name right, is called Mass Motion. And Mass Motion is used, or was used, to build the brand new Beijing airport. So that was an Arup project. And what it does is Mass Motion monitors the flow of people. So you can imagine right now, all of a sudden you go, hang on a minute, let's reuse that modelling to do something else. So actually at the moment, it's helping other companies with using this modelling to model how they're going to get people back into a building. So from that point of view, it's really cool. The other thing that one of the teams did, the Hong Kong team, was the thermal imaging. They took a thermal imaging machine and, believe it or not, literally did it over a weekend to create a thermal imaging machine that can take temperatures of people in the reception area of buildings. And they tested it out on our own building. In fact, we've got 3 or 4 buildings in Hong Kong, tested it out on our own buildings, and have now been upscaling it to be something that can be rolled out globally. Because as you can imagine, if you've all got to line up at certain points to have this sort of temperature check on your forehead, that's going to take forever. And it was really slowing down productivity and being a real blocker. It just puts the brakes on so many things. So actually using thermal imaging to take like mass thermal pictures, and you have someone a bit like at security at an airport monitoring these, and if they pick up that someone's got a high temperature, they just have a conversation with them, and that's the point that they do that. So there's been a few things like that in terms of using things that already existed and then just kind of like reimagining them for now. And things as well like pathogens, pathways, because we have ventilation engineers as well. So not only with thinking about mass movement of people around buildings, they've been using modelling to model how the pathogens from somebody coughing can affect a building, and therefore airflow and those sort of things as well, and then recommendations for going back into existing buildings. So again, it's not been about building shiny new stuff again, it's about turning things on its head and saying, so what do we already have that we can use for innovation to get people back to where they need to be?
It's really cool. It sounds really sustainable too, to be reusing those things and to, like you said, reimagining in ways that you can reuse it. Okay, so I think we've got time for one more question today. So a lot of organizations have been talking about their return to work plans, and some are even saying that they're not going to be going back into their offices. And so if we look into the future, what would that mean for like a city center like London, for example, if a lot of organizations aren't going back into their offices, and how can we make sure that this space doesn't become just like a ghost town people don't come back to?
I think that's where some of the reimagination about what we might use spaces for. Fun enough, I saw BBC Breakfast wrap at the Trafford Centre this morning, which is one of the biggest retail parks, and they were talking about repurposing it for nurseries and for doctor surgeries and things like that. So I think it's going to be about using that kind of the technology and existing problems, if you like, that we have, and reimagining what we use spaces for. Some can be repurposed in terms of housing. It's incredible, actually, where the Arup office is based in London. It's in Fitzrovia, which is just parallel to Tottenham Court Road. And there are so many places around there now where it's not just office space anymore. There's a lot of living space and lots of vertical gardens and things like that. So I think it's going to be about not building more stuff, not consuming more stuff, not pouring more concrete into things, but thinking about how we reuse things and upscale them in a different way, so we can make them more human-centric as well. Because, you know, one of the things we try and live up to is the fact that we're a humane organisation. So if you bring things back to that, and a socially useful organisation, we have to do that. We can't not do that. So at the moment, there's a lot of thinking about the size and shapes of teams within Arup to work with clients, therefore to repurpose things. Because the other problem all of us are going to have in certain places, but particularly in London, is getting on the tube and doing those sort of things. I know we miss it maybe slightly, but in different parts of the country, again, this is where I think it's so important to look at what certain bits of your organisation are doing and work out why something is working really, really well, and then working out whether it can work somewhere else. And if it can't work somewhere else, why can't it work somewhere else? And then we'll have to think of a different solution for that. And that's when you think, oh, hang on a minute, is there another organisation that maybe is in the next door building? I wonder what they're doing. And actually having those conversations, because I think there's going to be much more co-creation in the future as well. And certainly that's something that goes right back to the key speech of Arup, because it's interesting, whenever you see these buildings, they always credit the architect, don't they? Oh, Sir Norman Foster, brilliant, fantastic. Ove was always passionate about saying buildings do not go up with one person, it's a team. And actually, I think we have to think more broadly about what team means right now. And team could mean the company in the next door building or the floor above you in the office. And actually, I think it's kind of useful because it comes back to human connection again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's really cool. Thank you for sharing all that. I love that today's kind of been focused a little bit about the conservation geek in me is like loving this conversation about sustainability, and we started off with human connection and everything. So that flew by today. I think it went really quickly. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I think I'm going to shut it down for today. But thanks again for joining. I will see you next week. I'll send out a follow-up with a blog post that I shared at the beginning and